Hey Watchers, today we take a look at a piece of work by Canadian funny man Jim Carrey. This rubber-faced legend of comedy has been a force of nature on comedy stages, TV, and movies for decades. Known to tread on the dark side of comedy from time to time, this film was his first foray into that particular subgenre. So lock your doors and don't put down the remote. It's time for 1996's black comedy, The Cable Guy. Welcome to the Midnight Watch Podcast, the show where we discuss classic, cult, and modern classic movies.
We're your hosts, Jeremy and Josh Baruto, and we review movies that are at least 10 years old. Fair warning, we're big on spoilers here, straight from the get-go.
We rate these movies in 4 categories. Number 1, the level of impact and success it had when it was released. Number 2, how relevant is it today? Number 3, our own personal enjoyment of this movie. And number 4, is it a midnight watch?
What is a midnight watch? It's a film which completely captures your attention, drawing you in. No matter what time or what part you start watching the movie, you have to finish it. All right, everyone, welcome to the show. Today we've got Nashville local comedian Joe Paris. Joe is also part of the comedy podcast Drunk Comedians. Joe, tell us a little bit about yourself and what kind of trouble you get into.
You're putting me on the spot here. Yeah.
Just a little bit. A little bit.
Comedy is actually a recent thing for me. I didn't get into comedy. Actually, I did my first stand-up comedy night. I have it in my notes here, but it was July 8th, 2019. So
wow.
It's actually not that long ago. And honestly, the way I got into it, I met some dude, we were hanging out, and we were talking about doing a podcast, like a comedy podcast. He's been wanting to do stand-up. So I'm like, well, have you done stand-up comedy? He's like, no. I'm like, how long have you been wanting to do it? He's like, 10 years. I'm like, 10 years and you haven't done it. So
wow.
I have a total fear of public speaking. So like legit fear of it. So I'm like, you know what? I need to challenge myself as well. So I told him, I'm like, listen, let's pick a date. Let's both do stand-up comedy. That way you challenge me, I challenge you. And so we did it. We picked July 8th, 2019. Oh, did I say 2018? No, 2019.
You said 19, yeah.
Yeah. So July 8th, 2019, and we both did it. I don't know, man. It was like one of those things where all of a sudden the trajectory of your life changes.
Wow.
You had those experiences where you do something, and it's like your life is never the same after that. And it's kind of what it did for me.
That's awesome.
So my buddy Todd, who's really into comedy, he started introducing me to a lot of comedians that I hadn't listened to. And that's kind of where, so it's relatively new. Comedy's relatively new for me.
What are some of your influences?
So I remember as a kid watching Eddie Murphy. I remember listening to Eddie Murphy Delirious.
Yeah.
With my brother in our bedroom. I don't know how old we were when it came out. We were probably like 10, 11 years old. We were listening in my room, and my dad walked by, and he overheard it, and he kind of shook his head and like a very disappointed look. But it was, to me, it was funny, and I don't know.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that was like one of my earliest memories of stand-up comedy was Eddie Murphy, and then so as I got a little older, I got into Andrew Dice Clay a lot. I really liked his comedy.
Oh, the Dice Man.
I actually saw him live.
Really?
When I was 14, 15. I was living in New York. I grew up in Long Island, New York. And he came to the Nassau Coliseum to do a show. And you had to be 18 to get tickets for it.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah. So we had my buddy's cousin, who was 18, go with us, buy the tickets. We were like 15, And so that was a lot of fun. But yeah, he was a big influence as well.
That's awesome. Did you know all the jokes beforehand? So you were like, when he would do the callbacks?
Oh, absolutely.
Nice. Yeah. That's awesome, man.
Yeah. I saw him on, when I was, my buddy that I went to that concert with, we first saw him, we were kids watching, I don't know if you guys remember this, Rodney Dangerfield would have young comics come up. Sam Kinison got a star. Like a lot of those guys, Andrew Dice Clay, Barry Sobel, a lot of those guys got their start with Rodney Dangerfield.
That is cool. Yeah,
So we saw his stand up, and it was just like a 10-minute skit that he did, but it was just hilarious. It was so much fun, and I don't know. It was a big influence on me.
Very cool.
So today we are diving into the movie The Cable Guy, which you picked this one because this is one movie that influenced you, right? Like it definitely kind of sparked something in you with comedy.
Absolutely. But I got to be honest, when I first saw the movie, I hated it. I bet. Was dating a girl, and we went to the movie theater to see it.
Yeah.
And we both hated it. Almost walked out of it.
Wow. Oh, man. Just didn't get it.
Yeah, it just didn't get it. And you guys seen Jim Carrey's character is so bizarre, so outrageous. It's like, it's so creepy, when you first watch it, you're very uncomfortable. You're not laughing because he's super creepy.
Right. Psycho.
Yeah. So when I first saw it, and then it wasn't until years later, and actually I was talking to my wife about this. I was trying to remember because my wife loves the movie. It's like one of our favorite movies to watch.
Nice.
And I was trying to talk to her. I'm like, how did that movie become it's such a big part of our lives, big part of it. But as far as a movie, and I was trying to retrace the steps, but I do remember what a girlfriend of mine at the time seeing it and just hating it. And then I wound up stumbling back across it years later, and I'm like, man, this film is brilliant.
And you get it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it clicked. Yeah.
That's
I know.
Awesome.
I mean, when you think about, when it came out, I mean, I don't know if it's the heyday, but I mean, when you think of Jim Carrey, you're thinking Ace Ventura, The Mask, Dumb and Dumber. I mean, he was huge. I mean, the biggest guy in the 90s. And then to have him do a black comedy. Yeah. I mean, that's insane.
After doing Mask and doing exactly. Yeah.
It was
in fact, I think he was the first actor to get paid $20 million.
Right.
He's the first $20 million actor.
Yep.
From that.
Right.
I guess at the time they probably just gave him a ton of freedom, and he was the biggest actor at that moment.
Right.
It was interesting too because when you were talking about paying $20 million, how a lot of when the movie came out, it made his money back and more. So it was a successful film technically. It didn't blow it out of the water like the previous year. He did 2 movies the year before, and then 3 movies the year before that of Ace Ventura, The Mask, like you were saying, Dumb and Dumber, all those like the big Jim Carrey hits. And it was pretty funny though, because the other studios wanted to call this not a hit because they didn't like the idea of having to pay their star $20 million.
I've heard stuff about that. Yeah, exactly. Like it put a target on his back after 20 million,
It did.
Like, they're going to critique that. They're going to look at everything. They're going to,
dude, that's 90. Yeah. In 96, $20 million. Like, you mean shoot, Robert Downey Jr. I think got I don't know, off the top of my head, I think it was less than 10 million for the second Iron Man movie. Right. And that was it's just crazy. Jim Carrey was a huge force. Let me drop a little bit of information.
The budget was they only spent 40 million. Half the freaking money was spent on Jim Carrey's salary, man.
Right? Yeah. Let me drop some facts real quick, and then we'll dive into it. So this was directed by Ben Stiller, and it looks like it was. Apparently, this is actually written by Judd Apatow, except he had to go to bat for it because he didn't get a writing credit on this.
Yeah, I've heard. Yeah.
And so, so Judd Apatow actually wrote that, who of course would go on to great fame, which is funny. This is the movie that he met Leslie Mann, the main girl in this movie, and that became his wife. And then, like you said, budget was 47 million and the box office was 102.8 million. So that was a pretty good turnaround on that. It was starring Jim Carrey, Matthew Broderick, Ben Stiller, Leslie Mann, Jack Black, Jeanine Garofalo, George Segal, and Owen Wilson. There's a lot of different comedians in it that actually don't really do anything in this movie, but I'm like, oh, that's David Cross. Yeah. Oh, that's Bob Odenkirk.
Kathy Griffin's in it. Kathy Griffin.
I know. So many cameos.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was cameos at the time or if they were just up and coming comedians that Ben Stiller knew.
So what I read earlier today, as I was fact checking a little bit. So Ben Stiller had the Ben Stiller Show in the early 90s or whatever. And so this basically, what he called it, was a $40 million Ben Stiller show episode.
Right.
So basically everyone that was on his show got some kind of little part in the movie. So that's why you saw, Janine Garofalo and a lot of these other people which they were all, when I think of 90s comedy, I mean, I remember Janine, Garofalo, and I remember a lot of these other, actors being in, kind of smaller comedies or whatnot.
Right. And of course, Bob Odenkirk is, I think, like as big as he is now, like that just, he was just in there just kind of laughing. Oh, dude. And Kyle Gass was in there. Like,
yes.
Kyle Gass. Yeah.
Yes. At the end. I know.
You guys know about Tenacious D?
Yeah.
Okay. So, all right. Yeah.
No, Tenacious D is legit. Yeah. When I saw it, I was like, oh, that's Kyle Gass. Yeah. And then
He's the couch potato. Yeah.
Right.
And then he picks up the book at the end. He's like, maybe I should read.
Right. He's like, there's something outside of TV. It's just like, I gotta say, so you already told us where you saw it first. You actually saw this in theaters, you were saying, right?
I did. Yep.
That's legit. Let's see, I don't remember when I first watched this. It's got to be at least 10 years ago or something like that. And I was with you. I watched this and I was like, what is this? Like, I didn't know anything about it and I didn't like it either. And so when Josh was like, he wants to review The Cable Guy, I was like, that's a perfect pick because it's a Jim Carrey movie that people don't really talk about, but it's not like a forgettable Jim Carrey movie like Mr. Popper's Penguins or something. It's like legitimately a cult classic movie. So I was like, I'm excited to watch this again. And so I'm really glad that you picked that because otherwise I probably wouldn't have watched this again just because my first impression of it was just not good. Yeah. So Josh, when's the first time you watched it?
So this I'm with you. I didn't watch this when it came out. Like I remember it coming out. I was a huge fan. I'd seen most of his other movies by then. And for whatever reason, I just didn't see it. I don't know why. And then later I remember watching Me, Myself and Irene, which is very dark compared to this even. So anyways, I saw bits and pieces of this movie just on TV over the years. I finally realized, I think I've seen the second half of this movie probably 3 times just because it'd be on and I end up watching it.
Right.
But I had never watched it all together until I watched it yesterday actually. And, but anyways, after having seen Me, Myself and Irene, when that came out, going back to this, I was like, well, this isn't that big a deal. And then the more I thought about the era that this came out in, I was like, okay, I get why people were kind of mad about this because by the time I saw it, I know all the darker material that he's done and he's great at it. He's, brilliant actor.
But back then,
exactly. If I had come out of watching Dumb and Dumber, which was my favorite comedy back then, and then watched that, I would have been so disappointed, just like you. But it's crazy how the cult status of this movie has really gone up.
Yeah, dude. Even watching it, like preparing for this podcast, watching it again. I mean, I've seen it like probably almost a dozen times. I'm like finding more things in it. I'm like, man, there's some brilliant like aspects of this movie, especially a lot of social commentary about like, society and it's super.
It's very insightful. I mean, he just says stuff in it that you're like, wow, that's kind of profound. I mean, it's not a throwaway, goofy line.
The funny part is they're all TV lines. They're
right.
They're profound.
But they took all the smart lines from all these TV shows,
I got about like half of I don't know if it was even half, but this of just like the throwbacks to different TV shows. Cause obviously I'm younger than both you guys. And so I didn't get to watch some of this different stuff. Which is funny though. We did watch My Three Sons growing up.
We did
on reruns,
like Nick at Night or something like that.
Yeah. So when they flashed that on the beginning, and then he said his name was Chick Douglas, I was like, wait a minute.
You knew.
Yeah, both of us. Yeah, we were big fans of that.
A lot of the other things, like when he's like, I learned the facts of likes. Well, watching the facts of life, like things like that. Like I never watched that show. And so I'm sure I didn't get a lot of the different references. And I was like, this is loaded with references. This is like such a huge love letter to cable TV. And so before we get into it too deep, Josh, do you want to read us the synopsis real quick?
Yes. Let's give a rundown of the movie for those listening who haven't seen the movie, don't care about spoilers. And again, Wikipedia, thank you. Here we go. Architect Stephen Kovacs moves into an apartment after a failed marriage proposal to his girlfriend, Robin Harris. Taking advice from his friend Rick, Steven bribes cable installer Ernie Chip Douglas into giving him free movie channels. Chip gets Steven to hang out with him the next day and makes him one of his preferred customers. Chip takes Steven to the city's central satellite dish, where he confides to Steven about being raised on television due to the frequent absences of his single mother. Chip soon proves to be intrusive as he crashes a basketball game between Steven and his friends and leaves multiple messages on Steven's answering machine. Following a passionate night battle between Chip and Steven at medieval times, Steven finds that Chip has secretly installed an expensive home theater system in his living room as a gift in return for Steven's friendship. Although Steven declines the gift, he agrees to host a party attended by Chip's other preferred customers before having the system returned. In the fervor of the party, Steven sleeps with a young guest, whom Chip reveals the next morning to have been a prostitute that he hired specifically for Steven. Upon this revelation, Steven angrily kicks Chip from his apartment. To make amends, Chip tracks down Robin, who is dating another man. A disguised Chip severely beats the man in a restaurant bathroom and tells him to stay away from Robin. He later upgrades Robin's cable, ostensibly as a gift from Steven. Robin decides to get back together with Steven as a result. However, when Chip informs Steven of his role in reuniting with Robin, Steven politely ends his relationship with Chip. Devastated, Chip sets out on a series of vengeful acts. He gets Steven arrested for possession of stolen property and mocks him through a prison visitation window. After being released on bail, Steven is further embarrassed when Chip attends dinner with his family and Robin. Following a sexualized version of the game Password, Steven openly berates Chip and punches him. The next day, Steven is fired from his job when Chip transmits a privately recorded conversation in which Steven insults his boss onto the company's computers. Rick investigates Chip at Steven's request and finds that Chip was fired from the cable company for stalking customers and uses the names of television characters as aliases, such as Chip Douglas from My Three Sons and Larry Tate from Bewitched. Chip calls Steven that night, telling him he is paying Robin a visit. After visiting Robin's empty apartment, Steven tracks them down to the satellite dish, where Chip holds Robin hostage in a rainstorm. After a physical altercation and a chase, Steven is able to save Robin. As the police arrive, Chip apologizes to Steven for being a bad friend. Chip, proclaiming that he must kill the babysitter to prevent others from becoming like him, dives backward from the top of the ladder above the satellite dish, falling onto it and knocking out the television signal to the entire city. Chip survives the fall with an injured back and bids Steven farewell before being hauled away in a rescue helicopter. When one of the paramedics addresses him as Buddy, Chip asks the paramedic if he is truly his buddy, to which the paramedic replies, "Yeah, sure you are," causing Chip to smile deviously. And I'm just realizing as I'm reading the synopsis, if you didn't know it was a comedy, you'd be like, you wouldn't have no idea.
Yeah.
Well, that was the whole point, though, of what Judd Apatow was. I forgot who's the first guy that wrote this screenplay. This is the second screenplay that Judd Apatow made.
Like Leo something. Yeah,
like Hoist or something.
Yeah, and they said originally the screenplay, they said they were trying to go for like a What About Bob theme.
Right,
like a lighthearted,
yeah. And they said, I think honestly, like Jim Carrey was the one that kind of like forced to go to the darker darker sort of comedy on it.
Right.
Yeah. I saw that that Jim Carrey and Ben Stiller. Well, Ben Stiller, Jim Carrey, and Judd Apatow, when they were kind of looking at the rewrites of it, when they were shooting, Ben would shoot a lighthearted version of the shot with the comedy being kind of lighthearted, and then he would shoot one where Jim would just go totally dark and devious kind of, and then they would just pick which scene worked better. Oh, wow. So basically there was like a lighthearted version and there was like a really dark version where they had to cut some of it out because it was too dark, I guess, which I would love to see like an absolutely evil version of this movie.
Well, I thought it was pretty evil, pretty dark. I mean, how much darker can you get? I mean,
apparently a lot darker.
Yeah. Crazy.
What's funny though, is like, I found myself actually rooting for Jim Carrey's, like his character. Because not to belittle Matthew Broderick, who is like good in some stuff, but he's so vanilla in this movie. And I know that's part of his character, but he's actually not that nice of a guy in this movie.
He's not. I saw that too.
He's a toolbox. He's a toolbox. Yeah.
Right. So when you see Jim Carrey doing all this stuff like for him, And yeah, he's kind of extreme. And you're like, Jim Carrey's not that bad of a guy. He's just kind of, and then like, of course, when he like snaps, then like it goes like full on, like what is that? Play Misty for me or something like that, which they actually quote that and show part of that movie in there. Where like it was full on stalker.
Yeah. Or like Cape Fear.
Yeah.
But what's funny is I noticed too on the movie because, it's just some physical altercation between him and Matthew Broderick. Jim Carrey his character never assaults Matthew Broderick, if you know what I mean. Never hits him, never assaults him. And it's like you're right. Like he kind of,
Yeah, he truly wants to be a friend. I mean, he's socially awkward, but he's being genuine. Yeah. And then and especially when Matthew Broderick like breaks up with him after he finds out that his girl's gonna get back.
The rain
scene. The rain breakup scene. I mean, it's like,
oh man, that's
we've all
so
had
smart.
that. We've all had that annoying friend, but it really made me realize then it's like, man, what a jerk. Like there was no reason just to end it completely, especially after he went and did all that, yes, he's annoying. He's a little overbearing, but it's like, what a jerk.
I mean, I think the worst thing he did to him, I think before that was like, he got hired a prostitute for him. But like, even in his mind, that was like trying to be nice. And so it's just,
it wasn't like, malicious. It wasn't a revenge thing. It was,
I know that.
What did he expect? When the first time he meets him, the dude's banging on his door.
Right.
What did you expect when you were gonna spend time with some normal person? No.
Right. No, I know.
And I gotta say though, I think it's Matthew Broderick's own fault though, because Jim Carrey like asks him to hang out, and then he's just like, okay, because he's just like depressed, and he keeps going with him on these different things. It's not like Jim Carrey really like messes with him at first, but then it's like once he earns his trust, and then the prostitute thing happens, and then he's just like, but
that is so creepy. That's it
is.
Not a drip.
It's my treat. You get it next time.
Right. No big deal.
Next time.
No big deal.
You're just like the look on his face. You're just like, what?
Right. I mean, I'm sure there's guys out there like that, but I'm just like that casual remark of just like, it's like, oh, you buy lunch next time.
Nothing.
I do think it's kind of funny though. Like Jim Carrey says in that scene, he's like, dude, no girls like that would actually hang out with us. But then like later in the movie, he's super charming to different people.
Family,
right. And like, so he makes like Robin really likes him. And so I was just like, dude, you could totally, but then I was thinking about it. If he started having like actual like commitment issues, like I can see how he'd totally go stalkerish and stuff like that. But I was watching the movie and I was like, is he called the cable guy? Because he doesn't have a name. Is he called the cable guy because he was raised on cable, not because he actually just installs cable? And so I was like, maybe that's why it's like a double part.
That's true.
Right. Yeah. That seems
right. The TV was his babysitter, and at the end of the movie, he's like, "I killed the babysitter."
Right.
You got to kill the babysitter. The TV. Yeah.
Right. And he's even, I mean, it's like there's that redeeming quality about him even there where you're like, man, he's a little crazy, but even right there, he's trying to do the right thing or, do something nice or,
Jim Carrey.
The thing that really struck me too, like, and I picked up on this, watching the movie before this podcast. And so everything he says, like, as far as relationship advice, is like really really good advice, like really spot on. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like he's like really knowledgeable about relationships. Like,
well, and especially
he had no human contact because the only contact he had was his TV,
But even still, the fact that, yes, he learned all these things from TV shows, he got all the good stuff, like the actual good stuff from all these random movies and shows and, could apply them to life in a successful manner. I mean, then you're kind of like, well, he's kind of brilliant for being, having a crappy childhood.
I think, the funniest scene was, one of the funniest scenes was when they're laying on the satellite dish and he gives them some of that insightful relationship advice.
Right.
And Matthew Broderick's character is like, yeah, that was super insightful. He's like, that was last Thursday's final thought on Jerry Springer.
Right. Yeah. Hey, we watched Jerry Springer for more than the fights, apparently, you know?
I guess some people
Now
did.
he's got some insightful advice.
Right.
Yeah. I thought it was interesting that I was reading here too. And apparently Jim Carrey really wanted to die at the end of this movie so he was originally supposed to be impaled, and then they changed it so he didn't get impaled at the end. Really? But he was totally committed to where he was like, I totally want to like die at the end, so that way it'll kind of save my character. But then, of course, they didn't do that.
Well, it looked like he fell like 100 feet. So
I know, right?
Come on, anyway.
Right. And it was funny because you do expect him to be impaled. So it was pretty. The gag is funny that he lands next to it and like breaks his back. And he's like, "Oh, I'm still alive."
Yeah, it's almost like they could have ended that movie, a few times before, and then,
Right.
Like it could have ended with him being impaled. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously this movie's about him and not about Matthew Broderick. But honestly, if he ended up stealing Robin and then like they want to have a good life, I would have been happy. I would have been like, okay, because like, I mean, he's manipulative and all that stuff. But like, I was just like that. I felt like Matthew Broderick actually kind of hurt this movie because he's just so boring.
Dude, I agree with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because like every scene that Jim Carrey is in, he nails it. Even if he's creepy or, he's like lovable still, his range is incredible. And it was controversial for when it came out. Absolutely. This was actually originally written with Chris Farley in mind. But
I heard that. That's right.
Yeah.
All right, Chris Farley. I was going to say Sam Kinison, but I think you're right, Chris Farley, right?
Yeah, he wanted
Chris Farley was he was
going to do it, but apparently right after Tommy Boy,
Sam Kinison was dead by then. Jesus.
Oh, okay.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah.
But anyways, Chris Farley though was going to do it, but he had scheduling conflicts, so he wasn't able to do it. Which I'm not going to lie, I would have loved to see that version of it too, because he's also like super intense, and I've never seen Chris Farley be creepy. So
it would be an interesting dynamic with Carrey's creepy character and Chris Farley, right? Yeah, that would be an interesting.
Well, then I also saw that Ben Stiller was offered the role, and so he was at one point he was going to direct and act the lead. Which, I mean, and I don't know if this is based on what we've seen Ben Stiller do in general in his career, looking back, but I think he would have been super dark. I feel like he already kind of was able to do that.
I probably should know this, but was that his first movie that he directed?
It was the first movie that he was not in.
Right. That he but wasn't starring, that he directed.
Right. That's what I mean. That he wasn't starring in.
It is the first movie, though, that him and Owen Wilson are in the same movie together, even though they're not on screen together. Yeah. But I thought that was interesting. Yeah. I actually don't. I should have looked that up, too. I was going to look that up, too, about Ben Stiller directing. Because he makes kind of weird movies. Like, you think of Zoolander and like, Walter Mitty, but like his earlier stuff, I don't remember if he directed Reality Bites, but he's always done. He did. I'm
just fact checked it while you're talking. Yeah, and I thought so too. But Reality Bites was his first, other than the Ben Stiller show. That was his first movie.
That was his first movie.
Okay,
which definitely had a darker tone to it,
right?
And which kind of lends itself, I think, to him directing The Cable Guy and it being kind of a darker movie,
right?
So definitely, to me, it fits as Ben Stiller's work. Right. But obviously Jim Carrey, we still knew him as more lighthearted, crazy. Yes. But not dark.
And I was reading something where they said Cable Guy was Jim Carrey's movie to let Hollywood know I'm not going to play a certain type of character. Like I'm going to do other things. I'm going to stretch my creative acting abilities,
Right.
That's pretty incredible. Like, cause you do got to have that. And of course he would go on. He did the Truman Show like the next year.
He's done a bunch of great movies. Yeah.
Right.
Which is kind of different. Yeah.
Which is funny. That's like the opposite of this movie where he's on the TV and he doesn't realize he is, versus in this movie, he's watching TV like all the time.
That's a good point.
Nice. Yeah. I didn't think about that. Yeah.
So the real question is, did Sam Sweet, did he actually kill his brother? Like we don't know. So there's actually in the novelization,
it's strongly, they don't give the verdict, right? They just
Yeah. He kills the cable.
Yep.
Now they in the novelization they strongly hint that he did. But I was reading this, and there's a strong theory too. Apparently the 911 call, that's actually Jim Carrey doing the 911 call. It's not Ben Stiller. And so there's later, like when they're watching the footage, and
Really?
he seems to be like walking by, he sees the trial on TV, and he's like, oh, that guy's a bastard or whatever. And then he goes on. So there's a theory that Jim Carrey actually was like stalking him and ended up killing his brother. And it's not proven or anything. It's just a theory that's out on the internet. But I was like, oh, that's
pretty cool.
Yeah.
Gotta love internet film theories.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Hours of entertainment.
So Jim Carrey's character was the one that killed that brother. Oh wow, yeah.
Right.
Think about that, yeah.
You know, it's funny. I was reading this because when you said like, hey, we should check out the Cable Guy, and I typed out the Cable Guy, first thing that came up was Larry the Cable Guy. And apparently Larry the Cable Guy was having his start already in comedy. And so his manager reached out to them and was like, can you rename this movie? This is not at all what Larry is trying to do. And they're like, nah, forget you. And so like, and obviously though, it didn't hurt his career. Like he's more famous than this movie, but
you mentioned Judd Apatow, and like he was the one that got that call. I think it was him.
You're right.
Call, yeah. And they said, they're like, you can't use this title. You can't use this movie title. Larry the Cable Guy, you know. And,
right.
But obviously it didn't hurt his career, you know.
Right.
Larry the Cable Guy was a little bigger than the movie.
Right. Oh, I thought this was funny too. I read that the part where Jim Carrey gets punched at the end and he loses his lisp. Like he forgot to have like that was him forgetting to have his lisp, and then he just ad-libbed and he was like, you corrected my lisp. And then they just,
are you kidding me?
No. And then like they went with it, and like that whole scene, which is hilarious. Yeah, that was because he forgot to do that and then ad-libbed.
Oh man. So I was trying to figure out the deeper meaning behind it.
Right.
And now you told me it was no meaning. Right. I'm like, why did he lose his lisp for that one punch, and then he gets punched again and gets his lisp, you know?
Right. Well, it sounds like, I mean, just from what I've been reading, I think that dude just riffs all the time. I think that dude just is never not funny. Yeah. So I think you probably have to have a lot of patience when you're directing him, because he probably, here's the line and here's another one, and another, you know, it just kind of goes on.
Change our direction to fit the line that he, you know, that said.
Right.
Right. Well, the whole scene with him doing like, hey, like, you done with that chicken? And he puts the skin on his face and he's like, hello, Clarice. Like that was him completely ad-libbing, and Ben Stiller thought it was so funny that they left it in the movie. But yeah, that was not planned. And like, you can see, I guess, in that scene that Matthew Roderick is laughing, trying not to laugh because he just totally,
he's genuinely busting up.
Oh yeah.
Speaking of not,
go ahead. Sequence, that whole medieval time sequence. I mean, there was, I think 3 or 4 times where I had totally laughed out loud on this movie. It just surprised me. Like, this is funny. And the whole medieval time sequence.
Medieval times?
No, I've seen them my whole life. I've never been.
Oh yeah,
I have. So it was like, so for me, it was like, it was hilarious. Yeah,
spot on. Oh
yeah, I was totally spot on.
Yeah, my wife.
Literally, that's how they do. It's like medieval times, you know.
Right.
My wife is gone, but not. I haven't made it yet though.
Yeah.
The whole Spock and Kirk fight. Like I'm a mild Star Trek fan, and just so I knew exactly what that was even before he was referencing it. I was just like, oh my gosh, this is hilarious.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's so good. Oh, I love too that Jim Carrey, like at the end of the movie, this just reminded me where he's like, what we're missing is the intense music. Da, 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 da. And then like the orchestra soundtrack actually picks it up and is playing the same music that he's singing. And I just I love that. I thought it was so funny. But speaking of other parts of people cracking up, when he's beating up Owen Wilson and he's doing like,
I was going to say that. Yeah.
I swear that Owen Wilson is
cracking a laugh, right?
Yeah. He's not acting. He's just trying not to laugh. And
I said the same thing to my wife. That's so funny. Yeah. I'm like, he's trying not. Yeah.
Oh, and this was awesome too. I didn't realize. So apparently Jim Carrey is like horrible at basketball. And so
I saw that.
Did you read that?
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that whole scene where he's doing basketball, he was so bad at it that Ben Stiller was like, just mime that you have a basketball. And then they digitally added the basketball in later. So he's literally.
No, he couldn't even dribble a ball.
He couldn't dribble.
Really?
Yeah.
Which I gotta say,
great scene too. That is
I know, dude. When he's gorilla guarding, that guy and just getting all around him, I was dying. Yeah, I was like, that is hilarious.
Oh no, the better check the ball.
Right,
looks good.
Looks good.
Let's go, White Shadow.
But I was surprised too when he ran out. I'm like, that he's like pretty fit. Like he was. Right. I always thought of him as like a really skinny guy, but I was like, no, he's got some muscle on him. I was surprised.
He does. Yeah, no, absolutely. Apparently too, like this was the first movie. They were shocked that nobody had ever filmed at medieval times before. So they went, really? First time they shot a movie at medieval times. Yeah.
Jim Carrey wanted to do it. Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah, I was surprised at how smartly written the script was, because at the beginning I was like, wow, these scenes are long. There's not a lot of scenes in the movie, but they're kind of like each scene is like almost 15 minutes long, and it kind of moves at a different pace than a lot of movies, even for 90s films. Because like Dumb and Dumber, it's just like constantly, it's just like boom, 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 constantly changing, doing different things. Yeah. And in this one, they stay in the scenes almost every time, and then you get like the entire song of Jim Carrey singing. And the medieval times is a long sequence. Every sequence is longer than like I kept waiting for it to cut and go to something else. But I think that actually goes to show the strength of Jim Carrey's acting in this movie. And he's such a good actor in this movie, though. Like nobody else I think really even has a chance to shine. Like even Jack Black, who's normally hilarious, it's like of course his character is.
I want to talk about that. He is. I've never that I can think of. In him having kind of a pretty significant side character role.
Yeah.
He was the straight guy.
Yeah.
I don't think he did anything Jack Black funny that we know him for. I don't think he did anything the whole movie. He's like the concerned, caring friend, like totally straight character, which
and it was super early in his career too. So I don't know, maybe like what was he in before that? I didn't know.
I mean, he was funnier. He was funnier in Enemy of the State or The Jackal, and like he was
well, you're right.
Computer nerd, at that time. Yeah. Which I think Mars Attacks was after this movie, which is like when you see him starting to do his weird little.
Yeah. I remember the first time that I saw him, and I laughed my butt off. Was High Fidelity.
Oh,
behind John Cusack.
Great movie. Yeah.
I remember seeing that. I'm like, who is this guy? He is killing me. I'm trying to see when that came out.
I don't remember. That's the first thing I saw though with him, and it was School of Rock. And then I went back and started watching his older movies, and I was like, oh, this guy's awesome.
Yeah, he's so funny. And he's so talented. His acting.
Oh, yeah.
Singing, right. Musician. Like he's just super talented. Yeah.
Yeah. No, he definitely is. It's funny how somebody just gets, well, even Jim Carrey, I would describe him too. I feel like he could be an amazing, epic, Oscar-winning, like serious dramatic actor. I feel like he could totally do a Tom Hanks and become the next, I don't know, A-list. I mean, he's already an A-list actor, but just as a straight drama. Because Truman Show or The Majestic.
Right.
I mean, he is amazing. Those are just two quick examples, but I wish he would, delve into that more. He's done, what was it, The Number 23? That one where he's like
I don't think we should talk about that movie because it's just a horrible film.
Is it that bad?
I mean, unless you want to watch Jim Carrey.
Tell us what you really think.
I mean, unless you want to see Jim Carrey having sex in slow motion a bunch of times. Like, it's just, he wasn't even a serial killer.
All right.
No, that movie was played up that he was going to be a serial killer, and then like turns out he's not. But it's a Joel Schumacher movie, and no, I'm not a big fan of Joel Schumacher.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Anyway, I'm sorry, I totally took the fire away from you on that one.
Well, just saying that I wish he would do some more serious roles because he is so versatile, and he just. But then again, you do what you love. You love being funny, doing funny stuff. Hey, keep doing it. I mean, that's like Jack Black.
Right.
So kudos.
I think that he said he wanted to be the Man of 1,000 Faces, and he said he got up to like 238 faces or something like that before he had to give up on it. But yeah, like
I read about it, like his early stand-up career, and he said, I don't know the exact number, but it was over 100 impersonations. That he could do. And he's like, before he got big, and he's like, everyone they were like promising him fame and all this stuff, and he could do over 100 different voices and 100 different,
crazy talent.
Fascinated by people that can do that. Like my wife, like she can do any accent, any voice. I'm like, I can't do that. I know one voice, a loud New Yorker. That's the only voice I know.
It's amazing. Yeah, when people can mimic like that and copy, it's unreal. Like I remember him from In Living Color before the movies.
Oh,
Fire Marshal Bill and
the Juice Man.
Oh yeah, jeez, man.
Jay Cornish, the eyebrows.
That might be my favorite one.
You gotta juice it, Jerry.
Nice.
Well, we're getting time's starting to get away from us a little bit. Let's go. Do we have any like final thoughts before we go into our final verdicts? Joe, any final things you want to say about this movie?
There was a couple things like I love the underlying themes that were running throughout the movie, like the kind of like pseudo Menendez brothers, like all the news clips kind of gave you a temperature of the times of the 90s, what was going on. The Jerry Springer show, though, like all those, like, so that was super interesting to me. And then like we were talking about earlier, like how insightful his character was as far as like relationships, but yet how foreign true human relationships were. Like he was brought up on the TV. The TV was, so everything. And like I find it like it was hilarious that every insightful thing that he said was a TV quote.
Right.
Yeah. Even at the end when he was about to, when he's in the helicopter, like he's quoting, like, well, he's about to die. He's like quoting, I forgot what he was saying. Something about, oh no. Okay. Now I remember. He was actually giving the guy medical advice based on like some of medicals, right? What was it? I'm still remembering it, but he was giving the paramedic.
Oh yeah. Right.
Based on like a TV show that was
right.
But
right.
I thought it was brilliant. I thought that was really, really clever and interesting. And the fact that, so he was brought up on TV and he knew all these things, but he had no social, socially, he was totally inept,
Yeah.
Right. Man. Yeah, no, absolutely. Josh, do you have anything that you wanted to, any last thoughts?
I got to tag on with what Joe said a little bit. I completely agree that all the smart dialogue and even just collecting all those smart lines from all of those different TV shows and movies. I mean, that does add to the rewatchability of this movie. And I think I would think in some ways has added to its cult status and people coming back and being like, you know what, that was really smart. Like once you can get past, okay, this isn't Dumb and Dumber. This isn't Ace Ventura. Right. This is something else. And then when you start to realize that and even just maybe be like myself, you go and you watch, his later movies and then you come back and you're like, okay, we've seen him do dark. I can handle this. And then you get past that. And then you see all the smart writing, but my last thought is just being a teenager in the 90s, it really brought me back just the music and just being a Jim Carrey fan at that time and just seeing all those different comedians in there who were, in the cool kind of hip comedy movies that are uniquely 90s. I mean, it really changed into the 2000s. I mean, that's like any decade, I guess, different from comedies in the 80s, but it just kind of sent me down a sentimental, memory lane a little bit. So that was kind of fun. And even like the fuzzy signal on the channels at the beginning for the intro. I mean, that totally brought me back to just watching, trying to get that one channel that you didn't really get, but it's kind of good enough to see hit the TV. But I meant to say too, like all the underlying themes, like I love the fact that his lisp, like that was like an underlying theme and throughout the whole movie. And if you notice a lot of the characters, because I have like a slight lisp myself, and a lot of the characters were all S's. Stan Sweet, Doctor, when he gives him the book on the speech impediment, Dr. Swears, his name is Swears, or Steve, the character's name is Steve, and like everything was S's, which I thought was brilliant, Yes.
I don't know if you guys picked up on that. There was a lot of the
I didn't, but I totally get that.
Yeah.
That makes sense now.
I want to say one of my favorite scenes in the movie, I didn't mention this before, was when he's hooking up cable at Steven's apartment. He's rubbing the wall with the undertone, he's rubbing the wall, and then he pulls out a drill. That's right. I just
You're trying to drill through the whole house.
He's like, that's your sweet spot,
right?
That's your sweet spot. I don't know.
Oh yeah, did you
the list or like all that, like the underlying little things, the news clips that they constantly played. They give you like a range of the times that were going on.
Yeah.
There's a lot to the movie that when you first watch it, like we were saying, that you don't really pick up on.
Right.
After a few watches, you're like, wow, it's really well thought. Really well thought of.
I think it ties in what I was saying about it feeling uniquely mid 90s because of you had those murder trials, or OJ, or just these things that like everybody was glued to. Not that we aren't glued to, news stories now, but it was different then. Like you had to watch it in the afternoon after school was out, or, your parents came home from work. I mean, that's when you found out about these things, and it was like a soap opera every day. But
yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, there was. So yeah, did you guys notice the one part too, when Jim Carrey is right before he takes Robin, he's talking to him, and then like the spider crawls over his face. Did you see that? Like, I was like, okay, what's the story behind that? And apparently there was a cut scene where he's actually in like in the ceiling where Robin lives. And so like it was supposed to pan over and you could see he's already there to take her, but they cut that out. But it's kind of funny though. You're just like, there's a spider that just walks across his face and he doesn't do anything about it. It makes it creepier. It's just a small little thing,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I felt like this movie though, actually, like for example, Roger Ebert, he was famous for starting his review, and we quote him sometimes, but like he was saying like, you want to like Jim Carrey. That's why you go see him in movies. And in this movie doesn't want you to like Jim Carrey. And so he gave the movie 2 stars. So I feel like this movie was actually one of those classic movies that it just came out at the wrong time. It was ahead of its time. It's like, I mean, we're all three of us. I don't remember if you said so, Josh, but we didn't like the movie initially. And but now we're all talking about it. And obviously we all had fun watching the movie, and this is later. We are more aware of that type of humor. And we know Jim Carrey is not just Ace Ventura. He's not just Dumb and Dumber. So I feel like if that movie had come out, say, even 10 years ago, people would be like, wow, this is such a smartly written movie. This is amazing. And I just feel like it was just at the time that it was just so different than what he had done. Because I mean, even he didn't even do Man on the Moon yet, which was after that. And I mean, that movie was kind of instantly, you love it or hate it. It's obviously not a Jim Carrey movie. It's, so, but this movie though, you're still expecting, I mean, and the thing is though, half the movie, he is likable. He's funny, but he's just got that creepy little undertone underneath it. And so
he does some super creepy stuff. Like, it's so bizarre. Like, the facial, like when he stares at him, it's raining, staring at him, like, this is so bizarre and creepy. I love it.
Right. Oh man. So let's roll into final verdicts. I kind of jumped the gun on that one, but basically we break it down into 4 parts. So the first one though is, do you think that it hit its mark when it came out? I can go first on this one. Like, money wise, it did. It made back its money twice, but I don't think it was really well received initially. It was just like, it made his money because Jim Carrey is a big hit, but he didn't make even close to as much money as his other movies.
As they projected it was going to make.
Right. So Joe, what do you think about that? Do you think
I agree with that too. Like, I think at the time, like I said, we all didn't like it. I didn't like it. I didn't get it. I didn't understand it. it was super dark. And I think probably, and in fact, I was going to quote Judd Apatow. He said the same thing. He said, I wrote this down too. He said he actually said, when you first watch it, it's super creepy and you can't, like, there's no laugh. Jim Carrey's character is so bizarre. Right. He's like, when you watch it again, you see, see the humor in it. He was the producer and he actually said that,
Right.
So, so I think, like you said, I think at the time when it came out, it was not a flop, but not,
Right. So I'm sorry. We do it we rate it from like A to F, and I didn't even rate it. I'm sorry. Yeah. So
what would you rate it, Jeremy?
Yeah, for me, I would give it a C because it made its money, but it wasn't extremely well received, if that makes sense. So technically it was a success, but it not compared to at all like any of his other movies before that. Yeah, Joe, what would you rate it?
I would say about a C as well. Yeah.
C as well. Well, Josh, what about you?
Yeah, I'm going to go in there with you too. It was initially I was like, it's kind of a B- because yes, it made its money. It was a box office success technically,
right?
But it was the reviews were kind of rough. So yeah, initially I would drop it down to a C.
Gotcha. And next thing is, how relevant is the movie today? So let's start that one backwards. Josh, how relevant do you think it is today?
Well, this one, it's tough to me because it is such a cult movie. So I think it depends on who you're talking to. If you talk to a casual Jim Carrey fan, have they even seen it? You know, right? I don't know. I don't, you know, I feel like it's really just kind of people that are into movies that you might hear talk about this one as being a favorite. So I don't know. As a cult movie, I would give it a B. Just as far as impact on movie culture today in general, I mean, it's probably still a C. It's not a terrible movie.
Right.
But I don't know. I guess looking at it, because I mean, most people that like it now, it's a legit cult movie. So I would give it a B for a cult movie.
Legit. Yeah. Okay. So B for cult movie, and then mainstream, you were saying it would be more of like a, what would you say for that?
Oh, like a C, probably.
A C?
Yeah. Maybe a C minus.
That makes sense. Joe, what about you?
Yeah, I would say probably like a C plus. Yeah, I mean, so what was the question? So we talking about, is it relevant today?
Right.
Relevant today. Yeah. I mean, so if you replaced the cable with social media, I think it would be super relevant today.
Right? That's a good point.
Like how our society's tied up with cable back in the 90s, but now we're with social media. So which
is funny. He did predict in the movie that, you know, one day, of course he called it cable, but he was like, your internet, your TV, and your gaming, whatever, you know, it's all going to be in one thing. That was kind of fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, that's a really good point. I didn't think about that. Yeah. As for a cult movie, I think this movie is almost more for people that aren't Jim Carrey fans than are, just because it's so different than his like classic Jim Carrey stuff. So it is definitely a cult movie for sure. Yeah. Like it's
for sure. Yeah.
I guess, I mean, for large scale, relevant today, I got to give it a C. I wish it was more relevant though, honestly, because it's such a I honestly think this is one of Judd Apatow's better written films, even than the movies he's directed later. Like it's so tight. It's so like, I don't even get half of the TV references, but I understand that they're there. Like that is smart. And then you have Jim Carrey to top it off. Like that's really, really good. So let's roll into this one. So we're doing personal enjoyment of the movie right now. So I'll go ahead. I'll start this one then. Or actually, no, Joe, what's your personal enjoyment?
Dude, I'd give it an A plus, man. I would give it an A.
Love it.
It's one of my favorite comedies. You know, it's so bizarre, so interesting, so funny, so many layers to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That's my.
What about you, Jeremy?
A plus. So for me, I would give this a higher rating, honestly, if Matthew Broderick wasn't in it. I'm sorry, but he really bothered me in this movie. I don't know why. It's just, well, I mean, I do know why. He just was not an interesting character. And I was like, I don't care about this guy. Like Jim Carrey is throwing himself at him and he's just like, he's not worthy. And but for other things, like I said, the writing and personal enjoyment, I was very pleasantly surprised at how much I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. Not even just because of the time frame that it came out. Personal enjoyment, I got to give it probably a B minus. Like it was, I did enjoy it. I went from me really not liking this movie to, I actually would totally watch this movie again. And I would recommend it to a certain crowd of people for sure. What about you, Josh?
Dude, you took all the words out of my mouth. That's kind of how I was coming into it. Maybe not that I didn't like it before. Maybe. But no, I came into it thinking that like I was going to be a little more middle of the road on it. And I was surprised at how much more I liked it. Like you said, how interesting it was. I can really see the replay value on it. So I'm right there with the B minus on it. I thought I was going to be coming in at like a C plus or somewhere, a C, you know?
Right.
And I was like, no, I did kind of enjoy the weirdness of this movie. And I think it'd be super fun. Like you said, if you watch it with the right crowd, I think it could be.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've talked about that before on the podcast where there's even our 2 episodes ago when we did Flash Gordon, we talked about how there's certain movies that are just, and usually they're kind of bad, but they're so fun to watch in a group. You just get something out of it and pointing out things and just laughing at it. I don't know.
No,
By the way,
absolutely.
if I can digress or get off the
Yeah.
subject, I loved you guys' Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Oh,
right on.
Favorite
Thank
horror
you.
movie ever. Yeah, I listened. Oh, I loved it. Yeah, I'm like, I wish I was a guest on that one too. I could have
Thanks, man.
hours on that one. I love that movie. Yeah.
Hey, maybe we'll have you back if we do the sequel on that one, because that movie's like the complete opposite of the first one. So that would be a lot of fun to do that.
Yeah, for sure. Let me know. I'd love to be on it. Yeah.
So
Awesome.
jumping into the big question, is it a midnight watch? Is it a movie that you would as soon as if it's on TV and you're walking by and it's on, you have to sit down and watch it? It just captures your attention. I think, Joe, I know the answer for you on this one. But Joe, is it a midnight watch? Yes, it is.
Absolutely.
Oh man, for me personally, I wanted this to be a midnight watch so much after I finished it. And like I said, Matthew Broderick just brings it down a notch. Like, I'm not gonna lie, like, okay, I'm not biased towards Matthew Broderick. Like, I loved him in the Godzilla movie, and that's a freaking horrible film.
Right.
So,
Pretty good film. Oh.
yeah.
Right.
But so I do like it. I liked him with the producers. Like, nothing against him. It's just his character. I just was like, it really bothered me.
He plays this character a lot in a lot of his movies, but this was like the vanilla version of that character.
Right.
And I think that's really what hurt it, unfortunately, because we've seen him play just a kind of wimpy pushover kind of whatever guy. But this, it almost felt like he didn't try very hard in this one. Cause like you said, we've seen him in other stuff where he's great, he's funny or interesting or,
Yeah. He's super talented dude. Yeah.
And honestly, I think part of it though, that actually hurts his character is Jim Carrey is so over the top awesome in this movie.
Right.
Like, everything he does, you're just like, he can be likable 1 minute, creepy the next, and then like super scary with the next minute. And then he's back to like, oh, I totally like see why people, think this guy's cool. So I think, so for me, it's not a midnight watch, but it's like, man, it's almost there though. There's so many scenes in this movie though. Like, I don't know. It just depends on where the movie is, but it's not 100% for me. So I have to say it's not a midnight watch. What do you think, Josh?
Yeah, I think it's one of those, we almost need another category for, right, Joe, we've had this come up before where it's like, depending on the scene in the movie, you would finish the scene, or maybe from that point on you would finish it. And I feel like that's one for me where, the basketball sequence comes on, or the medieval time sequence. It's like, okay, I'm going to stop and watch this because this cracked me up. So, but in the trueness of the question, is it a midnight watch for me? It is not. So, but I enjoyed the movie.
Yeah.
Regardless.
Well, if you guys wanted to actually watch this movie, I rented it on Amazon Prime.
Me too.
Where did you did too, Joe? Do you own this movie, Joe, or did you rent it?
I don't want me to say it. I illegally streamed it. So.
Well, there's a lot of avenues to stream movies these days.
Hey, I'm trying to get it on a few different apps, but I couldn't get it. So.
Right. Well, it's easier to stream now almost than to have the DVD, because you can just like for example, I watched this on my phone. It's so much easier to just stream something than to. Right. I mean, I like to have hard copies of certain flicks, but no, I get you.
Yeah. Well, there have been times for my family we've rented a movie and I know we have it, but it's in the back room buried in a CD case, and you're like, I don't want to take the time to find it. I can just pay the $2.99 and we'll watch the movie.
Right. All right. Well, Joe, thanks so much for being on the show, man. You are.
Put that little clip of me stealing streaming.
It never happened.
I don't care.
Hey, where can people?
Man.
Yeah, absolutely. Where can people find out about you and about your other podcasts? Give us a plug.
So I do. I just got started in stand-up comedy. I have a website, Joe Paris Comedy. Joe Paris, spelled like the city in France, Paris. I'm one of 3 hosts of the podcast Drunk Comedians. And then we have a website, drunkcomedians.com, or you can get us on Instagram, Drunk Comedians Live on Instagram, or Joe Paris Comedy on Instagram as well. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah,
dude, it was so great to have you on here.
Oh, dude, you guys are great. Yeah. Thank you so much for inviting me.
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure to have you on.
Fantastic.
And if you guys want me back, let me know, man.
Oh, dude. Well, you already got the bug in our ears now about Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. So that was one that Jeremy kind of had to push me to watch. Well, you heard on the podcast, and I ended up loving it, like absolutely loving it. So yeah, I'm excited to watch the second one now, even though I know it's like a parody.
Oh my
of the
gosh.
first one.
Total twist. Yeah. Real quick before we go though, Joe, like, yeah. So the cable guy, just bringing it back to that real quick. You picked this movie as one of your favorite films, and then you're a comedian now. And so obviously, did you like this movie? Like you said, like you weren't sure like how it became one of your favorites, but like what resonates with this movie with you personally so much? Like, is it like I've been gushing about like the writing of this movie, which that's more Judd than, but yeah. So what is it about this film though that just really strikes home with you, that resonates with you?
I think so I think that film was like my first introduction to like really outrageous comedy.
Mm-hmm.
I was never into like outrageous comedy. I wasn't even Dumb and Dumber, like stuff. I wasn't that until I went back and like and looked at these films, you know. But I think Cable Guy was my introduction to like just outrageous comedy and just go, you know. And I don't know. So when I first was exposed to it, I didn't like it. I wasn't into that kind of comedy.
Right.
And I think we were talking earlier, and I was trying to pinpoint exactly what made me go back and watch it. But once I went back and watched it and just kind of, you know, and then kind of some of the other movies like that I watched when I first watched, I thought wasn't that good. Like, I don't know, Nacho Libre, something like that. Or,
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Like when I first saw that, I hated it. I love that movie. You know, stuff like that, like comedies like that.
Right.
So I think, so it's helped me in my own comedy, my stand-up, because kind of like, you know, let go of yourself, like be outrageous. You know, it's like being outrageous can be funny. It doesn't,
right.
You know, like, so I think.
Well, it sounds like it brought you out of your comfort zone. It stretched you and kind of grew you as a person even.
Yeah. But, you know, back then when I first saw it, I didn't know because I wasn't into comedy back then. I wasn't doing stand-up. So it was a kind of evolution. But when I first got into stand-up a couple of years ago, you know, I can look back at that movie and say like, okay, this is where, you know, kind of stand-up comedy, outrageous comedy, where I first started getting interested in it. If that makes sense to you guys.
Yeah. Where it was kind of more like, Where it was like something where like it wasn't mainstream comedy. It was a new type of comedy. Did it kind of open the box where you're like, oh, I can kind of expand myself in different ways to see how this goes. Yeah. Yeah. And then even because some of Jim Carrey's comedy in there is like, it's not funny. It's so bizarre and creepy.
Yeah.
But that's okay because that's also super interesting. And that's, you know what I'm saying? Like, and it gets people and it makes people uncomfortable. And kind of like with comedy makes people uncomfortable sometimes.
Right. And that's the stuff a lot of times that sticks in your mind. It'll be kicking around in your brain for weeks. Yep. You know, just, I get it. And I love it.
Yeah, I totally get.
Thanks for asking that, Jeremy.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally get what you're saying too about like how the first time, for some of the, like, for example, some of my favorite music albums, I did not like when I first listened to them. And then I've grown, like they grew on me. And now it's like, those are the ones I always seek out, like to throw on repeat. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. I was like, same thing. I was thinking that today. You mentioned music, Radiohead, the Bends, that album, same thing. I bought that album when it came out and I'm like, I didn't really listen to it. I was living in New York. I moved to Nashville, and a buddy of mine that I just met, he's like, oh, you got the Bends, popped it in. And like, it literally became the theme song for like the next 6 months of my life. Like, you know.
Wow. Yeah.
So
that's awesome.
It's all about timing. Like, art and
absolutely.
Action, like, it's all about timing when it, you know, it's got to be the right time, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Weezer Pinkerton is that for me.
Oh, really? Nice. Oh, yeah. Nice.
Yeah, for me, it's it's Believe with Justin Bieber. Yeah, it's just fantastic stuff.
All right, I know where.
Jeremy, I'm picking that
up. All right, well, thanks again, Joe. Dude, I can't wait to check out some of your comedy. I'm psyched. I'm definitely gonna check that out, man.
Terrible. See, Jeremy, I'm getting better.
Awesome. Fantastic. All right, well, thanks again, man. Thank you so much. Special thanks to our sound producer, Jake Colvin. If you'd had as much fun as we did on this episode, we'd love it if you shared it with your family, friends, and anyone that you think would like it.
Please subscribe, rate, and review our podcast found on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and many other platforms. Also, we'd love it if you visit our Instagram or Facebook page and join the conversation on what is your Midnight Watch. You can directly reach us at themidnightwatchpodcast@gmail.com.
Okay, everyone, you have a fantastic week. And as always, keep up the watch.